So, hello, my sunshines, and welcome to this episode of your session with me, Dr. Deborah Brown. And I'm so glad you're here. How are you? I hope that you're doing okay. Today, we have a really important topic that I think is really suitable for everyone. We're calling today self-image, worthiness, attractiveness, and validation. So I know some people at first hearing that might say, oh, this is about girls. But this is really about everyone. All of us have a picture of ourselves in our head of who we are, what we think we look like, where we think we rank in the world, all of that stuff. And even if you are a boy listening to this that has a woman in your life that you love, there are parts of this that are very women specific that are going to help you to understand her. So keep listening. So, the reason I love this topic so much is because so much of what I do in my work with people is help them to get a realistic picture of themselves. People don't have accurate mirrors. And I don't mean the mirrors on the wall, I mean the people around them. And they seek a lot of validation and a lot of the opinions of others to figure out who they are. And the dangerous part of that is that if you use the world and society at large to tell you if you're worth something, the messages you get back you may not like. So today we're going to talk about how do you sort through those messages. I'm going to call out some of those messages. I'm going to call you out for maybe how you're thinking about these things. And I'm going to give you some strategies to really make sure that your self-image is not causing you suffering. And that's really where I want to start today, is that I see a lot of people suffering because of the way that they perceive themselves relative to other people. And for some reason, a lot of people focus on the way that they look or the way that their bodies are. And our bodies are a container, they're important, but they aren't the whole picture of us. So, what I want to teach you today is how to get a good perspective on who you are, irrespective of your body, irrespective of your self compared to other people. So, that's kind of where we're going to go today. So, the question is the problem you or is it the world? And I can tell you the answer is almost always both. The problem is, yes, we live in a world that values a lot of the wrong things and sends a lot of really bad messages. That is a problem. Can you change that? Not on a large scale right now, but you can certainly work on that. You can put messages out there on social media and through the people that you meet about what's really important. You can do that. But what you actually have to change, and for purposes of this discussion, it's really about changing what you believe and the way that you look at yourself, not what other people think. So we live in a world where looks are a currency. And this is true for men and for women, is that the way that you look gets you indoors, literally and figuratively. And if you are a person who is born and grows to be traditionally beautiful, what I think of as like the Miss America, Mr. Universe beautiful, that opens doors for you. And there's an assumption in that you have it all together because you look a certain way. Well, those of us who have been out there in the dating world know that that is not necessarily true, that you cannot look at someone and make too many assumptions about exactly what's going on inside of them. You have to really get to know the whole person. So if you think about that, we do that to other people all the time. We size them up. Humans are judgmental creatures, but the problem is we also do that with ourselves. And it's reinforced by the world around us. There's a phenomenon called the halo effect. And the halo effect says that if you are traditionally beautiful in a society, that you will be valued more instantly. You will be considered better instantly. And I remember one time I had hired someone to be an assistant, and he came in the door and he was stunning, just traditionally beautiful, beautiful suit, good shoes, knew how to say all the right answers to the questions. And I thought, wow, he's terrific. And then eventually things started falling away. Things weren't getting done. And I realized that I hadn't really delved deep enough into his work skills, into his years of experience. And I think that what happened was is I fell into the halo effect. I assumed that because he looked put together that he would be really good. And he really wasn't. So think about that. How many times do you get caught up in taking the opinions of someone because they look a certain way, right? And I always use the Kardashians. I know you're all sick of hearing about the Kardashians, but I always use them because they're a great example. And, these are not great humanitarians. These are not greatly educated or knowledgeable people about the world in a lot of ways. These aren't people living where we're living. Um, and yet so many people look at them and listen to every word they say. Why? What gives them that credibility or that captivating nature? Well, it's because they're physically perfect and they've learned to make sure that they could do all of the things to make themselves physically perfect, and that in itself gives them a credibility. And it's very easy to get caught up in that because it is very captivating to look at someone who looks like that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to look like that. But the problem is that so many people focus so much on developing the exterior that they don't develop the interior and they don't really have a lot to offer. And I think that's a very dangerous message because it conveys that it's better to look good than to be good. And how much of that have you taken in over the years? So we see a lot of this on the flip side in stereotypes that we see in the media. And you all know this. You all see this all the time. The person that's old in a movie is a doddering old annoying person. The girl that's the big girl in the movie is always the funny friend. The guy that's like physically perfect is the dumb jock, or even worse, the physically perfect, whatever that means, ideal person is the one everybody wants. They want to be near, they want to have. And I think people do that because it gives them credibility. You know, I had stayed in dating relationships back in the day, probably a little too long because he was really, really, really good looking. And if anybody is afraid to admit that they've done that, it's okay, but I will admit it. And I think that there is something appealing about being near something we perceive to be beautiful. And by proxy, somehow it elevates the way we feel about ourselves. And I don't think that's a very healthy thing. So we go back to what are those messages, right? Go back to the media, right? Like, what are those messages? What does the magazine cover picture do to us in our own thoughts about ourselves? And I think what happens is that we don't see people that look like us. And I always say, go to Walmart, you'll see plenty of people that look like you and worse. And I think that what happens is that the message that we get when we watch TV or we look at magazines is that we aren't as good as them, that we don't look like that. Our belly isn't flat, our hair isn't super perfect, or we're not the ideal color, whatever that is at any given time. But all those messages send us a clear picture of our worth. And some of us are in tune to that and work real hard at not absorbing that. And other people don't realize that they're buying it hook, line, and sinker, that they really are comparing themselves to an ideal that's unrealistic and doesn't even matter. That's the crazy part. So I think about things like the people that we see on TV. If you turn on any kind of show, even a lot of the reality shows, these are very unrealistic pictures of what people actually look like. But yet we will still compare ourselves to that. And there's an interesting thing about old TV that you'll notice that it wasn't like that. I've recently, my husband discovered Columbo, the old show from 1970, early 70s. And I watched it with him and I saw something really interesting. The people in that show didn't have perfect teeth and they didn't have great hair and they didn't have a certain body type and they weren't modified by plastic surgery. They're just real people. And they were actors, so they were kind of like the best of the people at that time in some ways. But it was so refreshing because when I watched that show, it wasn't like these other shows where everybody is beautiful and everybody is perfect. And it was such a different feeling and it felt so much better. But it also made me really think about, what are we doing right now? What are we doing out there in media and social media? And how dangerous is it to us? Because it isn't real. And we are convincing ourselves that it is. So, what is beauty then? What is attractiveness? What does it even mean? And there are psychological aspects of knowing beauty that are really, really interesting. And once you kind of think about them, it makes you understand why we're attracted to certain people. So, the standard sort of psychological trigger to female beauty is waist to hip ratio. So, there's a certain waist to hip size that is considered automatically attractive. And it's something that's in us. And a lot of it comes from, strangely enough, from the idea to find a mate, a healthy mate that can give you children. There's your caveman sensitivity right there, or sensibility in there, is that the waist to hip ratio. If a woman has a small waist and larger hips, she is healthy and she is fertile. Sounds crazy, but it's in there. With women, it's shoulder to waist, or with men, shoulder to waist ratio. So a man with broad shoulders and a narrow waist is healthy and strong. And what did we want when we were looking for a mate? When we were a cave woman or a cave person, we wanted healthy and strong. So those psychological aspects are at work in the way that we're attracted to people and the way that we look at ourselves. So if we don't have those things, or we don't have the right ratio, we might automatically consider ourselves to not be an appropriate mate. How strange is that? But it's true. So the other one is that we like symmetry, that we think that beauty is about symmetry. And that one seems a little crazy to me. But when you think about it, a lot of the supermodels of, forever have been very symmetrical. And there's something about symmetry that creates beauty. But the crazy part about that is most of us are highly asymmetrical. Our eyes are different sizes, our boobs are different sizes, our feet even. Um, but we can't accept that as some anomaly. Oh, I'm asymmetrical, therefore I can't be beautiful. No, but there is something in us that naturally is attracted to that. Think about why people look good in glasses and sunglasses. Symmetry. You put a symmetry on your face. You put two equal size lenses on your face. Symmetry is attractive. So there are all of these things that are even beyond what we've picked up from the media, and things that we've picked up just because of our intrinsic sort of instincts being human. So beauty is relative to the ability to see the whole picture, though. In actuality, I think that we should define beauty that way. Beauty is not one thing. It's not symmetry or the way someone's face or hair looks. Beauty is the ability to see the whole person. So a person becomes more beautiful when you see beyond what you see initially. Think about how many people that you have in your life that you love and you just find to be so beautiful. And it could be your grandmother or your grandfather. And they probably don't have perfect symmetry and ideal beauty. But what it is beauty is the compilation of the outside, the inside, and all the things that you feel about a person. That's what beauty really is. That's the definition. That's what I believe. Um, Beauty isn't about being Miss Universe and being perfect, unless that's all that matters to you. And I would bet you every single person listening does not think that that's the most important thing. And it's certainly not what you live with day to day with another person. How many of you have ever kept a friend because they were beautiful? No, you wouldn't do that because it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be worth it. I think long term, the people that we keep in our lives, we don't keep because of anything about their attractiveness. We keep because they make us feel something real and they have value in who they are. And the value doesn't come from the way they look. We age. Look at what happens to us over the years and how much we change. And the way that our bodies change over time, is beyond our control in some ways. Take take women, for example, is that women go through puberty and their body changes. Women go through childbirth and their body changes. We go through menopause and we change. And all those changes are things that we can certainly work with, but we have to adjust and adapt to. What women go through when they have a baby and the things they have to adapt to. Their body gets crazy, big and different, and then shrinks back down and looks completely different than it did. And are we supposed to be defeated by that? I don't think so. I think that we're supposed to appreciate that that happened and we're supposed to move forward with that. Think of it as our scars, right? How many people look at a scar and go, that was a moment, right? We don't always hate them. We look at the scar and go, that's part of us. But we have a hesitation to do that with the rest of our body. To be able to look at your stretch marks and go, wow, a baby came from there. Look what I did. Some people can do that, but most people are too busy picking all the things that are wrong with them to see. So there's a thing that I really, really hate in our world and I hate it. I'm going to say that strong, ugly word. And it's the rating system. I'm going to tell you what I mean is she's a 10. Well, he's a 6. Oh my God, they were a 4 and they thought they could ask me out. And it is the ugliest, ugliest thing. And I bet you if I sat and said, what are you from 1 to 10? That you wouldn't reject the system. You would think about it and you'd say, oh, well, I'm probably a 6. If I lost weight, I'd be an 8. But what I would want you to say is, I reject a system that gives me a number based upon what I look like. But that's what I'm talking about in this particular episode is I want you to reject the systems that have made you feel bad about yourself. And one of them is the rating system. Another one is the way that we do online dating. We swipe on a picture and then we read. And it really needs to be the other way around. We need to read and then we need to see who the picture is. And that sounds crazy. And people go, oh no, and I have to be attracted to someone. Attraction at its first moment is chemical, it's desire. Attraction over time is knowing the true beauty of someone. So I think we get that backwards. I think we struggle with that a little bit. And dating is just one of those places that it really happens. So I want you to think about what is your ideal vision? What is it that you think you're supposed to be? And how much of you and your energy is spent thinking about getting there and how to get there? And how much pain does that cause you? We have a panic about aging, right? How many people do you talk to that go, oh, 55, look how old I look, right? Instead of I'm 55, look, I'm still here. I don't look so bad. I'm doing okay, right? There's an attitude around aging that's very dangerous. And I'm bringing that up because that's something that I need you to examine in yourself. Are you okay with saying how old you are? And what does it mean? And if it means something negative, you have to realize that the alternative is that you're dead. So if it's being dead or being 55, I'm going to choose 55. It's not so bad. But I want you to think about your own panic around aging if you have that at all. I also want you to think about how you present yourself. Now, I'm not talking about clothes and makeup, hair, shoes, whatever in the sort of vanity way. I'm thinking about how do you express yourself through the way that you present yourself? And is that curtailed by a fear or is it shaded by covering things up? And this is a really important one. I've had whole sessions with people over the years about their clothes and what the clothes mean and how we either get caught up in the size tag or we get caught up in what we think we can't wear or not wear. And I always use the example of like the bathing suit. I can't tell you how many women will say to me, or men, or people in general saying, I haven't been to a pool in years. Oh, I don't go in the ocean. I don't go to the beach. Well, why? Well, because I can't be out there looking like this. And I always think, have you looked around? When I go to the beach, I'm like, wow, these people are like doing it out here. I love it. I love to see like the 70-year-old woman in her bikini and the old guy in his Speedo, and everybody cringes about that. But I don't, because I think that person's swimming. How great is it to swim? Don't you want to swim? Right? So if I said, well, I can't swim because I'm too fat. Okay, so I don't get to swim. Is that because somebody told me I couldn't? No, I did it. I did that. I'm doing that to myself. And at some point, I'm taking all the messages the world has given, and now I'm using them to hurt myself. That's what I think some of you are doing. And I would bet a lot of you are doing is that you're absorbing those messages and then you're weaponizing them against yourself. And it's not even anybody else doing it anymore. I think it starts that way. I think that a lot of us have been bullied. And it's surprising. I was with a group of people the other day, and there were four of us. And all four of us could relate instances of bullying that we had remembered from 40 years ago. How powerful was that message that we remembered what somebody said from 40 years ago? So I want you to think about, did somebody say something to you once that never left you? Did somebody call you short or ugly or something? And has that shaped the limits that you give yourself on what you wear and how you present yourself? I always joke that I'm like slowly turning into Mrs. Roper. And any of you that are about my age will know who she is. You can Google her. She was on Three's Company. And Mrs. Roper was like the big crazy dresses and the bold earrings and the big hair. And what it was is that when she walked into a room, you knew she was there. And but the idea was really that she was bright and she was cheerful and she really knew how to express what was inside of her on the outside. So her personality was the earrings, it was the dress. And I think back to the show Criminal Minds. Remember Penelope, the blonde, right? And she, one time, I think one of the characters said to her that she covered herself in glitter and pink and outrageousness to get rid of the darkness that was around her. And I thought that was so beautiful. The idea that what you're conveying with what you choose to wear is to make you feel better, not worse, or to remind you of who you are. So I think I want you to think about that. Are you wearing a uniform that you're wearing to hide yourself? I know some people that wear basically the same kind of thing every day because they believe they can't wear something else. I had a conversation with somebody the other day and I was like, "Oh, what are you going to wear to that?" And she's like, "Oh, I can't wear a dress." I was like, "Why? Do you want to?" And she said, "I can't because I can't have anybody seeing my legs." I was like, "Oof, but do you want to wear a dress? Wear a dress." So how much of it is something that was said to us once that we've held and we still believe that we can't do? Guess what? You can do whatever you want. And I wear a two-piece bathing suit on the beach and have a blast. And I do not have a Miss Universe body. So I can tell you the first time I did it, it wasn't comfortable for about 5 minutes. And then it was. So are you internalizing some constraints or limits about how you present yourself? I know guys that won't wear short sleeve shirts, right? Think about the limits that you have and if they're real. So there's an interesting statistic that I read about body image, and it was that 1 in 3 people that are going to a gym has body dysmorphia. 1 in 3, that's a lot. So people talk about body dysmorphia a lot, and what they think body dysmorphia is that they look at themselves and they see themselves wrong, right? That they look in the mirror and they see something that's 300 pounds when they're 100 pounds. It's not really what it is. Body dysmorphia is actually where you spend too much time focusing on the flaws in your appearance, what you perceive to be the flaws. That's what body dysmorphia is. You look like what you look like. I mean, it can change, but there's a truth in it. But body dysmorphia says I have all of these things, and if I could just change them, I would be good. Do you hear the danger in that? If I just lost 30 pounds, my life would be better. Maybe it would. Maybe you'd feel a little better, but you'd still be you. So we don't want to get too caught up in the idea of obsessing about what we perceive as flaws because it can block out a lot of the good that you could be having. It could block out your ability to go to the beach or wear the dress or to go out on a date. I've had people that I saw one person and he was amazing. He was a patient. I just thought he was smart and amazing and funny and fabulous and what he considered to be about 30 pounds overweight. His heart's desire was to be with someone, to have a partner. It was everything. It's all he wanted. It's all he talked about. But his rule was until I lose 30 pounds, I'm not going to do that. So after I had been seeing him about a year and he hadn't lost 30 pounds and he was still lonely, I kind of sat him down and said, how did that year go for you? Would it have been better if you had what you wanted? But you're delaying it because of a false belief. And if there was somebody that wouldn't have wanted him at that 30 pounds over, maybe that wouldn't have been the right person. Because what if he met the person 30 pounds lighter and then gained 30 pounds, right? Be careful of the artificial limits that you set based on beliefs that you believe to be true. I'm not worthy of a relationship until I lose 30 pounds. Would any of us really say that's true? It'd be pretty mean to say to this guy, but sometimes we believe it anyway. So, body dysmorphia leads to very nasty things. When you don't, when you obsess about flaws in your appearance, you can end up with a lot of really big problems. When I use that statistic, 1 in 3 people at the gym has body dysmorphia. If you take that one person out of the three, the survey said that 70% of that group had an eating disorder. So, eating disorders are the result very often of a lot of things, but one of the things is body dysmorphia. And eating disorders are the most fatal of all the mental health disorders. Eating disorders are the most dangerous. So, do you see how not having a healthy image of yourself can lead to a lot of really bad things? So, we're going to work on that. It's really interesting when I talk to women and men of a certain age, let's say, post 40, is I see a lot of them looking at themselves and wanting to cut off pieces of themselves. They'll say, oh, well, look at this belly that I got. If I could just cut this off, right? And it's so interesting that people are looking in the mirror and cutting off pieces of themselves. It sounds so brutal and awful. And I saw a video one time where they interviewed people and asked them if they could change anything about their body, what would they change? And when they sat these people down, immediately people had answers. Oh, my eyes are too small. Oh, I wish I were taller. I wish that my belly wasn't so big. All of these, they instantly could come up with like 3 things. And then the best part of this was is at the end of it, they showed children and little kids like under 8. And they asked them what they would change about their bodies. And the answers were, I wish I had a tail. I wish I had wings. I wish I had ears that flapped and I could fly. And it's like, what is the thing that happens between childhood wishing I had a tail to wishing I could cut part of my body off? And I think there's a thing in our socialization that happens there. Think about children and how confident they are. When you see a little kid, they're rolling on the floor, their belly's out, they don't care what they look like. They don't care what you think about what they look like. They don't feel less worthy because of what they look like. So at some point along the way, we lose that. And I tried to figure out when I was thinking about this, what is the time that that happens? And I think the time is getting younger and younger that it's happening. And it's terrible because that means the suffering is starting earlier. The statistic I found about men was that 15% of men report shame about their body from the age of 18 up. 15% of men have shame. Think about that word, shameful about my body. The aspects they were most shamed about were their height, their weight, and their body hair. You cannot change your height. So let's just get rid of that one. Body hair, you can work on. Weight, you can work on. But the concern I had about that statistic was the word shame. So digging a little deeper, 28% of those men had anxiety daily about the way that they looked. And the worst one was that 11% of men had suicidal thoughts, directly related specifically to the way their body looked. So that means 11% of this group was walking around feeling like they shouldn't live because they aren't looking good enough. Who did that to them? And why is that happening? And I think we all know the answer is that these men looked around them and saw Channing Tatum and Brad Pitt and George Clooney and went, I'm not that. And therefore, I probably don't deserve to be here. And unfortunately, perhaps their potential sexual partners and life partners did that to them too. I really don't want to date anybody under 5'8", or I don't like guys with that body hair, right? So they didn't get those messages because they were children who decided they weren't worthy. They got those messages from people around them. For women, it gets even worse. 53% of 13-year-old girls are unhappy with their body. Half of all 13-year-olds will tell you that they're unhappy with their body. Do you think that's what 13-year-olds should be worried about? I don't. By the time a girl is 17, 78% of them are unhappy with their body. And we took little girls from 9 to 11 and asked them about diets. And 46% of girls from age 9 to 11 report that they're on diets sometimes. So I don't need to describe any of what all that means because I'm sure y'all are feeling it. Is that we're sending messages to people that are very bad about how they look. And the problem is now is you've got that in you now on some level. And for some of you, it may be huge. For some of you, it may be smaller. But I want you thinking about it because we absorb the messages about worthiness. And then the other part of it is we wait for validation of our worthiness. Validation is that somebody tells you something about yourself that makes you feel worthy. And so we get the message of not being worthy and then very often don't get validated. So the only validation is us. And we go, well, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not pretty enough or smart enough or whatever it is that I'm worried about compared to someone else. But the problem is if we wait for somebody else to validate that, we may not get the message that we want. So the messages are our responsibility. So you have to make sure that you are giving these messages to yourself. So how do we do that? First of all, you probably have an unreasonable expectation of what you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to look like, what you're supposed to be overall. And if you're still comparing yourself to some ideal, you may never reach that. I hate to say it, you probably won't. And you can get all the plastic surgery in the world. You can work out 5 times a day. You may still never be that perfect image. So I want you to think about right now, what does that person look like? What are you comparing yourself to? Think about it really hard. What does he or she or they look like, right? I want you to think about if that's realistic. And I want you to think about, are you setting yourself up for failure every single day? And you also have that idea that until you look like that you're not worthy. I want you to examine that because I would bet you have an ideal in your mind. And that's not wrong. I want you to have an ideal of something you'd like to be better than you are. I want you to grow. But I don't want you to pick something unrealistic that's going to make you fail every time. Because the truth of it is you can't hate yourself into changing. I'm going to say that again. I need you to hear it. You cannot hate yourself into changing. hate doesn't work. This is why diets don't work, because people do all this extreme stuff because they hate the way that they look. But the problem is that doesn't give us success. It just gives us hatred of ourselves. And that's very dangerous. So, one of the other things that I really don't like about the way that we do this in the world, and I would love for you to think about differently, is the before and after pictures. I despise before and after pictures because whenever you see that someone has made a change, whether it's their makeup, their weight, whatever it is, their plastic surgery, you'll see a picture of this person before and this person after. And in the before picture, they're miserable, dejected, and a mess. And in the after picture, they're happy and perfect. What is the message that's sent there? That you have to be sad until you can be perfect. And that's a powerful message. And I can tell you, if I flip through social media and I see before and after pictures, I immediately skip past it. It's so unhealthy because what it says to you is look at yourself now. You're a before picture. I hate to tell you, we spend most of our lives as the before picture, right? That it's a very unreasonable expectation that some switch is going to flip and that we're going to be perfect. There's a book that I'm writing now and it's called The Space Between. And what that book is about is that we have an ideal in our head about what we're supposed to be in all of the ways. And we are living in a different place than that. I'm going to be XYZ someday, but right now I'm living here. There's a space in between that. There's a space in between where we are and where we want to be. But the problem is that we live most of our lives in that space. We don't arrive at some beautiful place where we're perfect, but we also don't live in a before picture. The space between what we want and where we are is where we live most of the time. And I think that I want you to recognize that and recognize that there's value in where you are, that you're not waiting to arrive to be worthy. There's a beautiful, beautiful actress that I love that said something really powerful. And I use this sometimes with people that I'm talking to who are struggling with accepting themselves. And her name is Gabri Sidibe. And she was in Precious. I think it was 2009. And she was kind of a breakout. She came out of nowhere. She was 26-year-old, but she was playing somebody younger and she had really not been out there much. And all of a sudden she was nominated for this role for a Golden Globe and an Oscar and everybody was paying attention to her. And she was so non-traditionally beautiful in that she was big. She was very, very big compared to the average woman, whatever that is. She had very dark, dark skin and she had grown up in the projects. So here was this person that had all of these things that were perceived and that she even perceived made her less than. And all of a sudden she garnered all of this attention. And she was on stages and she was in gowns and she was all over the place. And she had said at some point that she struggled with that because she wasn't as beautiful as everybody else. Now, here was this woman that had achieved this major, major milestone in her career, had done this beautiful work in this movie, and still walked around less than because she was afraid of what she'd be perceived as compared to other people. And then at one point, she had a revelation. And her revelation was that you decide what happiness is and that you decide what beautiful is. And she said that one day she woke up and she decided that she would live as a beautiful girl. And it was so powerful to say that. She said, I decided that I would wear the colors that I wanted. I would wear the clothes I wanted. I would go to the spaces that I wanted to be in. And I would live my life as a beautiful girl would live it. And in her mind, she then became beautiful. Now, I'm sure there's a lot more involved in that, but I thought it's such a great example of she could have decided to stay small or less than, or could have waited to be validated by somebody. But instead, she went, I'm going to live my life as if I'm beautiful right now. And she did, and she glows. And if any of you have ever seen her on a red carpet or talking in an interview, she's vibrant. She's brilliant. She's got a lot going on in there. And to size her up as less than would be a big mistake. So, how do we get rid of this? How do we stop this? We focus on what we're building inside of ourselves, and we pay attention to the outside too, but we have to let go of what other people think. And I know that this is a hard one. So many of us are really struggling with this, but what other people think is none of your business. What is in their heads is not for you. And you might have to get real about how much you're doing that, how much you're really letting other people and what they believe about you rule the way you feel about yourself. Your life is about how you are. It's about what happens in you. Stuff is always going to happen around you. You can't control that, but you can control what's in you. And I think we give that power away. So I need you to be vulnerable about it. I need you to talk to people about what bugs you about yourself and be able to say, I'm really struggling because I feel like I'm too tall and it makes me uncomfortable around other women. And talk to other women about it or talk to men about it, right? And I remember saying that to someone once when I was dating and saying, um, sometimes I feel like I'm too tall. I have these heels on. I'm like 6 foot something with these heels on. And he looked at me and he went, No, you're like a goddess. And it made me laugh so hard because here I was walking around trying to shrink myself. And there was this person that thought it was amazing. So I think it doesn't matter what other people think, but sometimes you have to be vulnerable enough to ask for the validation that you might need. And there's a difference between asking for validation and getting an opinion to keep your head straight than relying on it to know if you're okay or not. Validation isn't all bad. It's just how much you seek it that's bad. So your value does not fluctuate with the opinions of others. And you will be so many different people in the course of your life. You will be so many different versions of yourself that if you allow other people's opinions to judge whether you're good enough or not, that could change at any given time because you're going to change. There's a poem that I really like that I want to read you today. And it was given to me by one of my patients, and she found it and she loved it. She said it brought tears to her eyes because it empowered her to look at herself differently and not judge all the different versions of herself. And the poem is called I've Been 1,000 Different Women, and it's by Emery Hall. I have been 1,000 different women. Make peace with all of the women you once were. Lay flowers at their feet. Offer them incense and honey and forgiveness. Honor them and give them your silence. Listen, bless them, and let them be. For they are the bones of the temple you sit in now. For they are the rivers of wisdom, leading you toward the sea. I've been 1,000 different women. And not all those women were perfect and beautiful and amazing. They were different pieces of you that grew to where you are now. So stop people pleasing, start self pleasing, start looking at what is it that you need to do to affirm all those women that you've been and get to the point where the woman that you are, the man that you are, person that you are, is worth affirmation now. And you already are. You're not worth more because you change the way that you look. You're worth it now. I want you to accept those compliments that people give you instead of going, oh, no, no, and getting all squirmy. The reason that we can't accept compliments is that we don't believe it's true. What if somebody gave you a compliment and you actually believed it? Somebody tells you you look beautiful and radiant today, and you go, oh no, I'm tired, I'm a mess. or if you just go, thank you, I feel that today. I think we learned somewhere along the way that you weren't allowed to be, you had to be so humble that you couldn't talk good about yourself. But I want you shouting from the rooftops, I feel great today. Do you love this dress? I love this dress, right? There's a really interesting activity that I really, really like where you write down things that you don't like about yourself and you write down 10 of them. And it's easy to do. I'm sure we could all do it. And then you take that and you sit across from somebody that you care about and you say those 10 things to them. So if you say, I don't like the way my belly looks, you have to say it to them. I don't like the way your belly looks. If you say, I'm too short and I don't stand out, you're too short and you don't stand out. When you say those things to another person, you suddenly realize how ugly they are. So I want you to do this. I would love for you to do this activity. Write down 10 things you don't like about yourself. And I hope you don't find 10. It can be 5. Hopefully it would be none. And then I want you to sit with somebody and have them do the same thing. And then I want you to say them to each other. So if you say, I don't like the way my thighs look, you have to say, I don't like the way your thighs look. And it's really powerful. It sounds silly, but it's not, because you'll realize just how mean you are in your head to yourself with that voice and how critical. And also, it might make you realize how unimportant and ridiculous the level of attention you give those things is. There's a book that I really like by Janine Roth, and it's called This Messy, Magnificent Life. And it's subtitled A Field Guide to Mind, Body, and Soul. Janine Roth is a lot of fun because she's got a great sense of humor, and she talks about a lot of how the role of our bodies plays a role in how we live out the story of our lives. And it's so interesting to think about the things that stop us that we might put in a category that we just accept. So if you just accept that you're never going to ride a bike because I don't ride bikes because I might look weird or somebody might make fun of me. And then you never ride a bike, but you want to ride a bike, right? But somewhere along the line, you made a rule and you stick to that rule, even though it doesn't make sense. Those rules are artificial limits. I want you looking at your own artificial limits here. So there's a paradigm in here that says that we are too much and not enough at the same time. And I want you to really think about that one too. Is I grew up in a house where I was too much. You talk too much. Be quiet, right? And then not enough. I didn't look good enough. I wasn't smart enough. I didn't do enough. And how can someone be too much and not enough at the same time? And that's a really dangerous way of thinking. I see people shrink their personalities. I see people shrink their bodies because they think that they're too much. They take up too much space, but at the same time feel like they're not good enough. You can't be too much and not enough. You aren't those things. But I want you to hear those words and I want you to hear if either one of those resonates with you. Has anybody ever told you you're too much? Whatever that means. And has anybody ever told you you're not enough? Now, if there's truth in some of it, you can work on it. If you're not sensitive enough or kind enough, or if you're too much and that you demand too much of other people, okay, I think you could work with those things. But those are just behaviors that we switch. They aren't who we are. So think about if anybody's ever told you you were too much or not enough, and how much you keep that and hold that, and how much you should change or not change, because it's an important consideration. I'm going to give you 2 poems today because I found another one that was really good too. And I think this is one of those things where self-reflection is going to be the use of what we're doing today. I'm giving you a lot of things I want you to think about. And I think poetry is really good for that. Poetry gives us this way of thinking about things differently, or also understanding that other people think that way too. This one is by Becky Hemsley, and it's called Too Late. When we are young, we want to look older. When we're old, we want to look younger. And there's a window in the middle of it all when we're supposed to look as we wish. But we waste that time wishing we were taller or thinner or curvier. Our hair was longer or shiny or curlier. Parts of our body were firmer and perkier. And that we'd started to use anti-wrinkle cream earlier. And by the time we realized we were perfect just as we were, the window has closed. It's too late. Too late to realize that all those things that never really mattered in the first place never really mattered. It's never too late to start letting go, to stop wanting, stop wishing. It's never too late to accept yourself, to look in the mirror and realize that all along you never needed to look older or younger or anything else. You just needed to look like you. That says it all, doesn't it? And I think what I want you to think about is, what does looking like you mean? Is there a certain way you could look that would make you more worthy or more attractive? No. You look like you, whatever that is. And you can be unhappy with parts of that, but you cannot hate yourself because of it. Make sure there's no one in your life who's making this worse. If there are people around you that are sending messages, I need you to stop that. I need you to stop taking those messages, and I need you to call those messages out. If there's somebody who picks on your weight or the way that you dress, I need you to consider how you're reacting to that. And I don't care how you react to it. I care how you absorb that, because that's super important. So make sure that you are not participating in media in a way that harms you. Makeup tutorials are great, workout videos are great, but is it helping you or harming you to look at these things? That's what I really want you to analyze as well. How much of your time is looking at idealized pictures of things that you are thinking you should be? It's very dangerous thinking. So I am going to say to you that your future self is rooting for you, but it's not the future self that is the ideal. It is the future self that is happy in who they are. Think about the difference there. Your future self is rooting for you. Every time you do something to take care of yourself or to be healthy, your future self is there going, good job, good job. That's very different than that future idealistic picture in your brain that you think you're supposed to be, that tells you all the time, you're not here yet. You're not allowed to be happy. Which one are you doing right now? Are you rooting for yourself? Or are you comparing yourself to an ideal that may never be you? So I want the takeaways to be today that you cannot hate yourself into change, that you are inherently worthy as a birthright, that at some point along the way you determined whether you were attractive or not, and that directly impacted your worthiness perhaps, and that you need to think every day about how much attention are you giving to your flaws or your perceived flaws, and how much is one physical part of you getting in the way of you doing the things that you love or want to do. You deserve a whole, beautiful life, no matter your size, your color, your height, your ethnicity, no matter what it is about you that you are judging as less than or not worthy or other. No matter what it is, you deserve a beautiful life that feels good to you on the inside. And take away that you cannot control the outside of you all the time, what happens around you. But what happens within you, you can control. But you got to get rid of some of the garbage first. So, my sunshines, I am so happy that we were here again. And I'm glad you're working on yourself and you're growing. But I want you to stop letting other people steal the sunshine from you. And more importantly, don't steal it from yourself. So until next time, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in a bit. Bye.